This video is going to look at a review of place value. And to start the review, I'm going to start with the place value of whole numbers. So to look at the place value, I've used a number. I've written down a number 485,371,926. You'll often see numbers written in groups of 3, separated by either a space, or if it's an American resource, you will see them marked with a comma. But in Canadians, we use the space. And just for some background information, the reason we use the space, so for example, this is the Canadian way of writing this number. The American way would be to write the same number, 485, 371, 926. The reason we no longer use the comma is that in many countries the comma is used the same way that we use a decimal. So we've gone to using a space. So let's go back to and look at this number, 485,371,926. What do these numbers mean? Well, in this case, the 6 means 0, the 2 means tens, and the 9 means hundreds. So it's a group of 3 numbers, and we've got hundreds, tens, and ones. Interesting thing happens once we get to the next 3 numbers. This 3 still means hundreds, the 7 means tens, and the 1 means ones. Same thing with the 4, the 8, and the 5, hundreds, tens, and ones. These groups of 3 numbers, these hundreds, tens, and ones, are called periods. So this is a period. These 3 numbers together are a period. And these 3 numbers together would be a period. Our number could go on, and we could keep adding periods. But instead of saying the first period, second period, third period, we give them names. The first one is called the units, or when we say this number, it would just be 926 units, or just 926. Second period is the thousands period, and the third period is the millions. So to say this number up here as one number, we would say 485,371,926. Whenever you say these numbers, you say the 3-digit number, the period. So for example, 485, you say this number first, and then you say the period name. So 485,371,926. We don't say 926 ones or 926 units, we just say 926. Another common thing that we say is some people will say 485,371,926. The reason we shouldn't be saying and is because when we get to numbers that are not whole numbers, when we look at the place value for decimal numbers, a decimal is a dot, or as I was saying earlier, in some countries a comma, that we use to separate whole numbers from decimal numbers. So a dot is written, and then anything to the right is a whole number, and anything to the left is a whole number. Anything to the right, you have your decimal number, what we call decimal numbers, and these numbers are less than 1. So they're less than a whole. So let's take, for example, a number 0.3. So this one is the first place after the decimal. It's less than 1. If we go back to our whole numbers up here, every time we move one place, let's say we move from the 1s to the 10s, we get bigger by 10. It's 10 times as big. From 10s to the 100s, it gets 10 times as big as well. So if we move backwards, from a 100s to a 10, it's 10 times smaller. From a 10 to a 1, it's 10 times smaller. Go down to our decimal numbers. These are a whole, or the ones place, or the units place. 10 times smaller, we get a tenth. Take one whole one and split it into 10 pieces, you end up with a tenth. So this number would be written as 3 tenths. If the 3 were 2 places from the decimal, first one is tenths, take a tenth, split it into 10 pieces or make it 10 times smaller, you get a hundredth. So you'd have 3 hundredths. Move it 3 places from the decimal. This is a tenth, a hundredth. Take a hundredth, make it 10 times smaller, you get a thousandth. So this would be 3 thousandths. If we want to say a number that is written as a decimal, take for example, I write a 3-digit decimal. I won't put any whole number with it. So 0.492. So to say this number, we say the number that's after the decimal. In this case, it's 492. And then to finish it off, we say the place where this number ends. And in this case, it ends 3 places from the decimal, which is the thousandths. So we write thousand, and then we put THS. When you see a TH on the end of a word, that means that this is the thousandths, as opposed to the thousands place. So the decimal numbers have the TH on the end. The tenth, hundredth, thousandth, and then you have 10,000, 100,000, millionths, 10 millionths, and so on, depending on how many places you move from the decimal. When we add a whole number, say let's take for example 426.685. So to say this number, we say the whole number first, in this case 426. Then we say the word and to indicate that we're at the decimal place and the remainder of our number will be less than 1. So and then we say this 3-digit number, 685. And to finish it off, we say the place where the 685 ends, and it's in the thousandths. The reason it's important to put the name, the place where you stop, is let's take for example 4.072 as opposed to 4.0 or 4.72. So for 4.072 we would say 4 and 72. Here we have the 72 ending in the thousandths place. And if we say this number, we still have 4 and there's a 2-digit number here, 72. But this time the 72 ends in hundredths. So we need to include the place value so we know whether it's right at the decimal or if it's moved away from the decimal. So in one case it's at the thousandths and up as in up here, and in the other case it is only at the hundredths. So this tells you where your number ends. So hopefully this is a good review for you to know how to write whole numbers and why we separate them into groups of 3, and also what the names are of especially the first 3 places after the decimal. If you know the place value for whole numbers, and if you look, for example, if the first place after decimal is the tenths, next one would be the hundredths, next one would be the thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths. That's if we're moving the other way. And the same pattern works in reverse for numbers smaller than 1. So hopefully this has helped you understand decimal numbers.